coming to you right from PDAC in Toronto, where the buzz is electric and the discoveries are just getting bigger. Welcome to the Market Frontlines. I'm Lyndsay Malchuk, and I am so thrilled to be sitting with a leader who is not only steering one of the most fascinating exploration stories in metal space, but also one of the board members right here at PDAC itself. Give it up for Mr. Terry Lynch, CEO of Polymetallic.
Let's punch that up. Always great to see you. It's one of my favorite things to come and visit with you.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, the buzz has definitely picked up here at PDAC. You know, it's 30,000 plus people coming through these doors. Let's start right there. So, you know, you get to see sort of the behind the scenes of what makes all of this come together. You know, what's the sentiment behind the scenes? You know, how are they feeling about the growth that's coming back? All the things like that.
Yeah, I mean, official numbers will come on Wednesday, right? But we're expecting it to be probably a record year attendance-wise. And you'd expect that to happen, right? I mean, now's the time for people to be coming to PDAC, and it's a great time for our sector. So I think generally that people are bullish, and you know, I think it's still very early days. This is I was on a couple podcasts, and I was saying, I think one of the messages we need to consistently get out there is that I think early people that haven't been in the space will come and sort of see, well, you know, Polymetallic's gone from, 20 cents to $1.40 in the last 2 years or whatever. So maybe I missed Polymetallic.
Right.
And they missed the early stage, of course, but that was a way riskier stage. Okay. Now, can Polymetallic go from $1.40 to 14 or 20 bucks? I believe it can. Now, is there a guarantee? There's no guarantees, but just using Polymetallic as an example, but there's that about many stories. And my message to the people would be, you're closer to the start line than the finish line. This is very early days, very early days. You're still getting great value for money. And I say to people, if you don't feel comfortable buying individual stocks like Polymetallic or whatever you might be looking at, put your money in good mining funds, and they'll do the job for you. But don't not invest in the space and over-invest in this space relative to your other portfolio. I believe you should be, downsizing from tech, putting more money into mining. It'll do you well.
Well, mining is definitely top of the list right now. There's a lot of hype, and it's not just hype. There is some really good stories coming out.
Tremendous stories. I mean, it was interesting to see Robert Friedland, who I was talking with down at BMO, speaking at the White House, and him reminding President Trump that, the S&P is like 1% mining.
Yeah.
It used to be as high as like 11 or 12%. So imagine if that doubles or triples the amount of capital that'll be pouring into the space. And I can tell you, because I've been doing a number of meetings down the States, talking to people that would have hung up on me before, and now multi-strat funds are saying, hey, we want to take a whole issue, just us, and we're saying, well, we're not raising money right now, but it's very encouraging that they're there, and that just shows you what's coming, because it's still early days for those guys.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's that would be the message, is that, you missed the dead cat bounce where we're going to move up.
Yeah.
And super bargain days, which happened over the last year. But it's so early, and you should definitely do your due diligence and look at a number of these great stories that you bring to the table.
Thank you so much. Well, let's then flip over to one of those great stories, Polymetallic. Tell us, what's the latest happening there?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the biggest news this year was when we dropped our metallurgical study about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we had been using 80% recovery rates. When you have a polymetallic story, that is one of the things we always dealt with investors. Because there's been some polymetallic stories, a number of them, that metallurgy has been the fatal flaw,
right?
Where they had been modeling 80%, and they delivered 60. So there was some fear for that for us, not from internally, because we had done our work, but certainly externally and with the investment community. So we delivered 95% across the board, and we were thinking high 80s, low 90s, and we got that. I remember, I said to Joe Campbell, I said, Joe, I knew he got the results. I said, what are the results? He said, Terry, I can't tell you. I said, what do you mean you can't tell me? He says, I've got to make sure, So he didn't believe me either.
Yeah.
So we went back to SGS, which is like the biggest guys in the space. It was a lock cycle test, the industry standard, and it was run of the mill, So it worked for low grade, medium grade, and the high grade. It's the same. So this stuff just comes out of the ground. It was wild. And we thought, honestly, I thought that maybe would at least 50% of the stock, maybe double the stock, because I feel like once we get above $2, this thing's going to run.
Yeah.
And so I thought this would get us above $2, and I don't know what would happen after that, because I really feel again, this is the man, I'm the biggest shareholder, so I'm long and therefore recommend. So take that into consideration. But I really feel like this should be $1 billion. Now, I'll give you an example of why later. But the stock backed off, and I'm thinking, wow, that's weird. And so I sort of look at it. I think, we always have to listen to Mr. Market. We may not like the message he's giving us,
I know.
but it is his message or her message. And so, I think the message is, we need to give more proof. So obviously the metallurgical study is proof, but right now for Lion, we don't have a 43-101.
Right.
So I think, and we don't have a PEA. So we've been working on that, and we were thinking we would do our full cycle. We've got another 65,000 meters of more drilling to do this year, another 10,000 meters to report on from last year. So we wanted to incorporate that all in the PEA. But I think what we'll do now to, put the catalyst out there is drill through the end of April, probably get 35,000 more meters in the ground, plus the 10,000, and then put out a PEA then. And this will, without doubt, it'll remind people this is going to be a mine. We don't have to find another ton here. It's going to be a very lucrative mine. And that's going to be, in the billions, I believe, in NPV. We'll see.
Yeah.
And it'll show how cheap we are. Because, look at the deal that Foran did.
Okay.
And you got to, I give those guys tremendous credit. The Foran management team, top tier, did an amazing job. They just did all the things right. They sold in the merger 3.8 billion. So basically they had 25 million tons at 2.5%. Now they got a bigger, deeper prospect, sure. But that won't come into play for some time. So effectively 700,000 metal contained tons for 3.8 billion. Well, we've got that pretty much now, and we're closer to surface in arguably a better jurisdiction, easier infrastructure, etc. Now, what they did, which is, I think, genius, is they de-risked it. They did the pre-feasibility. They did the feasibility. Okay. They got Agnico Eagle in as a strategic shareholder for 10%. Yeah. They got Franco in. They got designated as a national project in Canada. Those are all steps we can take. At the end of the day, metal on the ground and metal on the ground. Mm-hmm. So good for them that they got $3.8 billion, but we're worth $300 million. That doesn't compute. Okay. So I'm thinking that's why we got to get this PEA out there. We need to show people, hey, I think that the humbling message is we thought, Great Bear did it with just their exploration results. Filo did it with exploration results. But so I think that's the message. So we got to get that out there and make that catalyst come. And then I think that, the other thought with that was we've been obviously pushing to get on New York. And now we're ready to go. But, we actually thought the stock would have skated. We wouldn't have to do a consolidation. It's sort of not there now. And I'm thinking that it's acting as a bit of an overhang. Yeah. And people are thinking, hey, you're going to have to consolidate the stock. So, all the companies that have gone down there and consolidated the stock, they've done well. They've ripped it up. But there's always been a 2 or 3 day down dip, and then it rips up. So I think people are sort of thinking, oh, well, I can buy it on that down dip. And, I'm here to say, no, that's not going to happen because we're now going to delay that to the fall. Let's get our PEA out there. We got a bunch more exploration drilling. So it's like, sorry, your chance to buy it cheap is right now, in my view.
That's true.
So I think that's the other message we're trying to do is.
I think, too, that there's just so much specific headlines and news flow and everything around specifically gold, specifically silver, specifically copper.
Yeah.
That when you're polymetallic, people
you're chicken and beef.
Yeah,
you're buying chicken or they're buying beef.
I don't know what I'm getting here. So there's no education.
It's interesting. I was talking to Rob McEwen, who's obviously one of our bigger shareholders at BMO, and he came over and he was, Rob's such a gentleman. He was he was brainstorming saying, well, how do we get the stock going? And he said, I think it would be beneficial for you to talk about a gold equivalent because people understand gold. You know what I mean? And I think that, we probably maybe even do a PGM equivalent, but I think we need to sort of let people understand the way they understand. Okay. Because maybe, they're getting lost in, what does copper equivalent really mean? And especially when it's so bloody high. Because when I say 7%, people are thinking, did he say 7% or was that 0.7%? Yeah. Is it,
wait, what?
Nobody's got 7% copper. So I remember when we put out that whole 32 meters of 7%, I remember asking my geos, because we had grade above that. It was only at 110 meters. So we had some grade above that. We could have put out 130 meters of 2.5%. And we had put out some intersection before where we had like high, grades, but obviously 50 or 20 meters, and it hadn't really moved it. And I'm thinking, seems like people freak out when they get 100 meters of 1%. Well, we got double that. Let's put that out. And the guys were saying, well, it's not really technically, that's not really how you do it. And then and I was like, at the time I was thinking, oh, I still thought it would double stock. It did. Stock went down 20%.
Yeah.
We weren't even raising money. And I was like, holy crap. Yeah. But I think it's because partly, maybe because when they see 7% copper, they just can't put it together. They think there's some typo there.
Yeah.
And or that's just some weird anomaly.
So how do you prove that out then?
Well, this is maybe where the gold equivalency thing comes in, where the people have seen, gold grades that are quite high, and they seem to buy into that. Okay. So maybe that's more of a rational way for them to understand it.
Yeah.
As always, you're in the communication business. At the end of the day, one of my jobs is to communicate the story better. It's not my job to confuse people. It's my job to help them understand it in the best way they can.
And that's one of the things that, for me on my side, any one of our investors can go to your website. They can read the press release. They can read the assay result. They can read all of it on their own.
Yeah.
But what's behind that? What's the story behind that? And as you know very, very well, every decision is first based on an emotion, an intrigue, anger, sadness, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's that emotion first. And so my question for you is, what would be an emotional relatability thing that you can bring to your story for our investors to go, I want to look deeper into this?
Yeah. So I think, for me, we're on the verge of becoming a giant. Okay. And this is going to be, this potentially, I think the story is, the way I've been trying to sell it to people is, worst case, we got a mine here and we should be worth several times where we're worth today, if we find nothing else. Best case, these orthomagnetics can be very, very big. Okay, we're right now let's say 700,000 metal contained tons. The smallest one is over 1 million, okay, of the 20 that have been found. So it's likely we're going to get at least 50% more, okay? But several are more than 5 million and several are more than 10 million. And it's like, hey, we got that potential. And it's like, holy cow. So I get to, my downside is probably, if they don't find anything else, it's probably going to be a triple or a quadruple. And my upside is maybe it's a 30 or 40 bagger. So if that doesn't get you emotional, I don't know what will. There's not much more I can do. But it's the truth. And the scary part is do the math. Yeah. Go out there and look at the data. This is all, backed by evidence. So we've got, and that's the other point I make to people is that it's not like we got Larry, Curly, and Mo doing this. The team is unbelievable. On the science side, we got Steve Beresford. He was VP of X at First Quantum, and then MMG, and then Chief Scientific Officer at IGO. So 3 successive multi-billion-dollar discovery stories that he was there for the pathway. We got Joe Campbell, his team is running the execution of the drill bed, whatever Joe said, mine discover, basically the big Agnico gold mine Melly made in the Arctic. That was Joe's project.
Yeah.
So we got both those guys were trained at Western Mining, okay, an iconic firm. So we've got amazing teams. If you talk to the analysts about our teams, they'll say, buddy, you got so lucky to get this great team together. These teams are hard to get together in this competitive environment. So we got tremendous teams, and they've done God's work. They've found a pile of ore here. So, and they're using the best techniques to find it, and we're well capitalized. So it's like, why would you bet against these guys not finding more? Right. So it's undervalued, great team, well capitalized, mirror surface in Quebec, in a roaring bull market. What's not to love? That's what I'm doing. I'm checking it. I bought 600,000 shares in the last 60 days. So it's I'm not just talking out of my butt,
Well, thank you so much. I feel like we completely lost track of time, and I could just sit here and chat with you for sure. But thank you so much. And for all you're doing here at PDAC, thank you for that.
All right, Lyndsay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Cheers.
Again, that was Terry Lynch, part of the board members of PDAC and CEO of Polymetallic Mines, trading on the venture under PNPN, on the OTCBB under PNPNF, and in Frankfurt under IVV1. That's correct. Okay. With more on their work and, of course, more on this story, head over to powermetallic.com. This is a story where nuance matters and the thinking matters even more. And we'll be watching this one very closely. It just makes sense. Thanks for joining us on the Market Frontlines. I'm Lyndsay Malchuk with Appleton Media. We'll see you next time.